everybody, and welcome back to another MSE Discovery in Focus. My name is Ryan John Murphy. I am a data security SE for Microsoft here in Manchester, in England, in the UK to be specific. And as always, I'm joined by Heather. Hey, Heather.
Hey Ryan, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good to say it's a Friday, so it's even better. And the weekend is, for me, is a couple of hours away.
I'm so jealous. My Friday's working. Um, hello everyone. I'm Heather Ekman. I'm a data security SE as well, based in the US. eDiscovery background. Excited to talk more about eDiscovery. And today we actually have a special guest, someone that I've known for years and worked with before, and someone that I consider an M365 expert, probably one of the most uh, expert folks in eDiscovery with M365. I'll introduce Mike McBride, and Mike, you can do an intro for yourself.
I don't know that I can top that, but I'll try. Uh, Hi, Mike McBride. My day job is working in the title. My title officially is M365 Modern Workplace Engineer, which is just a fancy way of saying I deal with all of the back end of M365, right? All of the purview compliance, eDiscovery included, but also things like insider risk and Teams and SharePoint and just all that fun stuff. Spent all day, every day in there. And then I also, in my spare time, I do write a newsletter that you can find at newsletter.mikemcbride365.com. Hey, quick plug. Specifically about eDiscovery. And I started doing that a couple years ago, basically because I thought there wasn't a lot of eDiscovery content out there about from the M365 side in terms of using it, and all the little quirks and the little things you find and all of the little, oh, they changed this one thing way over here, but that's going to impact your eDiscovery, even though it doesn't say anything about eDiscovery.
Yeah.
So I felt like somebody needed to just kind of put that out there. And since I was sort of in that every day and testing that all the time as part of my then job, I would just start sharing that out and just help people understand it a bit better.
Yeah, and I think Ryan, we should be able to link his newsletter.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sure.
I use Mike's newsletter as a way to keep up to date on things, because, like I said, I've worked with Mike for a while, and Mike probably does some of the most thorough testing on updates in M365 and how eDiscovery is impacted by it. So definitely a really good resource, non M365, non Microsoft resource that digs into the actual eDiscovery impact.
Okay, cool. And I think that's a good. You mentioned updates there, and today's pod, we wanted to give everybody out there some resources, really, for you to keep up to date with the changes that Microsoft make with eDiscovery. We are an evergreen solution. We do build everything to work together. Therefore, there can be changes in like teams, as we spoke about last time, Heather, around the private channels, which affects eDiscovery, or there can be changes directly in eDiscovery that obviously affects eDiscovery. So, some good resources to try and understand where to go to keep up to date is very difficult. And most of the time, what I see is customers will notice a change and not really understand why that change has happened or how to manage that change or what the effects of those changes are. But we do have some good resources. Mike letters, newsletters, one of them. This podcast, of course, mine and Heather's newsletter also. But something official from Microsoft is pretty much where people want to gravitate towards, right, Mike, Heather? So we have what is called the roadmap. The roadmap has a lot of items in it, but in my experience, I'm sure in Mike's experience, and I know definitely in Heather's experience, it's a great place to go and filter just on a certain technology or solution like eDiscovery and understand what is coming down the line. We also have the message center, but in my experience, Heather, Mike, ask you the question. How many times do you really look in the message center?
I mean, the thing with the message center is it's within the M365 admin center.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't have access to it. Most people don't. And, even as an eDiscovery practitioner, I couldn't easily go to like my M365 team and say, hey, listen, I want access to the message center. They just absolutely would not allow for that. So anything in the message center, like I would have to rely on going to them or, looking it up in Google or something like that, where, hoping that someone would post, a blog or something saying this is in the message center. So, I think there's really, really good information in there. I think it's just kind of difficult to get to that information for just the standard eDiscovery practitioner. I know that there are also ways, and we can dig into the message center. There are ways to forward message center posts to people. But again, I think that takes a little bit more planning and discussion. So do you agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I'm in a unique position because my job, like I said, my day job involves eDiscovery that much, right? So I'm in Met Center every day, right? I'm very different.
You're the one who's no to me.
Yeah, so I'm in there every day because I'm looking for things that impact retention, things that impact our users. Like I need to let them know changes that are coming. So since I'm responsible for that stuff, I have admin access. I can get in there. I can look at everything. But you're right. When I talk to people who work in the discovery field, it's always interesting when they come to me with questions about like, and this is just an example of a question I got at a conference last couple months ago. Somebody was talking about how they went into their eDiscovery case, they ran a search, they got, a number of hits based on the date range, and they went back 3 weeks later and the number had changed. And I was like, well, what are the retention policies that are in place? And they had no idea. So they can't see any of that stuff. I was like, well, that's probably your issue right there.
Mm, mm. And that's a big one. And not to digress from the topic of the podcast today, but if data is not retained, it's not discoverable, right? And you would not believe the amount of time people get caught out by just the simplicity of, especially Teams messages. And I know this is a big one for private channels as well. And given the changes that happened a few weeks ago, people dump Teams messages out away, 30, 60, 90 days, and they can be prominent to cases. But that's not the first time I've heard that, Mike, sadly, but and I'm sure it won't be the last as well.
Yeah.
We could have a whole discussion, and maybe at some point we will. We can have a whole discussion about like retention and eDiscovery, because that Teams conversation comes up a lot as far as like how long do we retain Teams messages for? Because they can build up fast. So, but that's also why there's legal hold, where, if somebody is potentially subject to litigation, they can be put on legal hold, which will retain them. But that doesn't negate the need for, retention policies and understanding the retention schedule and making sure that the retention policies are in place and following that schedule.
Yeah, I completely agree.
But I think it's a good example of that idea of like, here's this thing that exists in the M365 world that directly impacts what's available in eDiscovery, but your common eDiscovery manager can't see it, doesn't know it, can't control it.
Yeah.
So you got to talk to people.
Yeah. I think Copilot interactions is probably going to be at the top of people's minds right now, based on that. And look, I think we will definitely do some podcasts dedicated to those, won't we? Heather, Mike, you're more than welcome to come on. I know you're doing some great work, which is inside of your newsletter around collecting, searching for Copilot interactions and what particular conditions that's needed and operators that's needed. So we'll definitely come back to that. We're back on topic, I think. Should we take a look at the roadmap just so everybody understands what it is, how to filter, and so on and so forth? Let me just do that No. So if I just share my screen. Okay, cool. So to reach this, it's essentially just Microsoft, or you can just type in roadmap into Bing and it will bring up the URL as you can see it today. I will include this URL in the YouTube and Spotify bios. But coming in here, you get the opportunity to look at what the M365 roadmap has. Now, I've just filtered based on the topic of what we're going through today around discovery, but you can come in here and you can search for anything, right, Heather, Mike? Anything
Yep.
to do with Microsoft, right?
Yep.
Yep.
This is going to have updates to any of the workloads and products in M365. One thing to note is these updates are managed by each individual like engineering team. So it's not like we have one team that just updates the roadmap. So each individual engineering team, so like the Teams team, the SharePoint team, the eDiscovery team, they're all responsible for these updates.
Yeah. Okay.
And under filtering, which I'm sure you'll go over, you'll be able to filter by like cloud instance. So if you're, GCC high, your federal government or something like that, GCC, state or local government, you can filter since that the release schedules are different for the GCC high, GCC, and different for like worldwide, which is what most of our customers are on.
Yeah. Great point there. Mike, anything you really gravitate towards in here when you're using the filters or searching?
Yeah, I mean, I use searching more than I use the filters, but I definitely use the filters to look for what's not out yet or what is rolling out versus not available. Because I do find that oftentimes when I sort of make a note that, this feature is coming out in July, and then I go back and look, I'm like, oh, it got pushed, but I didn't actually see that anywhere. So now that I'm looking for it, I'm like, oh, it's still not out. The date is now November, right? So that's something that I see frequently, is that sort of like things get delayed, get pushed, dates change. But my original note is like, look for this in January or whatever month. And I'm like, all right, it's February, March now. I still don't see it. Like, what happened?
Yeah.
So that's a good way to just kind of go in and search. And I have a note of the feature name, and I can drop that into search and find it pretty quickly. But I can also filter based on status, just to be like, what eDiscovery things are actually rolling out right now versus which ones are still sitting in development phase.
So how do you, Mike, before we move on, like you in your blog, you stay very current with the updates, and there's a lot of updates. Like we've seen months where there's hundreds of updates. What is your strategy for, looking at these updates, figuring out what's relevant? How often do you look at them? And like what recommendations would you have around a strategy to keep up to date?
My top recommendation is to automate as much as possible. So one of the things I do with the roadmap is I grab the RSS feed, and then I have that fed into a Teams channel, so that every day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, there's a post in a Teams channel that says, here's what got added to the roadmap today. So I don't have to remember to go look at the roadmap. It just pops into that channel. I see the little bright, the indication that there's something new in that channel, and I go and look at it. The other automation that I know a lot of people in companies take advantage of, and this sort of solves that problem of not having access to the admin center, is they will feed, or the message center rather, they will feed the message center into Planner. And I know of, at least I went at the ILTA conference this year, I was watching somebody do a presentation. They were talking about, they have somebody on their team assigned to go into Planner and just start assigning the different items to the different teams, right? So I don't have to have access to the message center. I'm getting this plan or task assigned to me. So if I'm on the SharePoint side, that's my role, right? Somebody is going in and actually assigning these tasks to me so that I see them and can look at them. which I thought was pretty good. Unfortunately, in my
Yeah.
environment, I would still be 75% of the assignees. But
Oh, okay.
but I do use that sometimes to kind of find the things that I'm not responsible for, especially like Defender, some of the security stuff that is somebody else's job, that I could be like, hey, here's what's coming. So there is, I think if you have a team like that of various people, using that planner extension is really useful to just make sure things are getting pulled in on a daily, weekly basis, however often you feel like pulling them in. And then the RSS feed for me is also super helpful. Like, again, there are days where it's like 3 or 4 things, and I'm like, I don't care about any of that, but I can just browse it real quick and be like, what's new? But then we get back into the same issue, right? Because I see something in there, I'm like, all right, it's coming in July, but then I don't see where it changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing to bring up as well is, once we dig down into the actual items, you'll see like the first item there where it says preview available and rollout start. Just because we say, something is going to roll out in June doesn't mean like that means that we're going to start rolling it out to tenants and it will start showing up in tenants. But depending on, there are lots of variables of when it will actually, like that update will actually show up in your tenant. And some updates take longer to roll out than others. I've seen some that have taken, more than a month. So it says June, but it may not show up in your tenant until July. So,
Yeah.
there's lots of variables to that.
Yeah. I think that's an important one as well, is the fact that even, and that's a great feedback, I think, Heather, is the fact, even though it says June rollout, I think the clue's in the name, right? It rolls out. And there are millions and millions and millions of tenants out there that get this on a slow basis. I think even from myself, not related to eDiscovery, the Teams the Copilot DLP that were recently released, that took quite some time. I had some customers like 6 to 8 weeks down the line that still didn't have it enabled in their environment, and it's like you just get it when you get it. That that's the reality of it. So that's the thing. I think is a good way to point that out, Heather. Also, you've got like this information bar at the top here. We've got 1 box filled in would mean it's in development, 2 rolling out, and then 3 launch. So another good way to understand, okay, like you're saying, Mike, what's coming in comparison to what's rolling out and to what's already launched. You've already got those indicators there for you. One other thing I really like, and I often take away, and I share this with customers, is the roadmap ID. Rather than having to come in here and getting the customer to filter on eDiscovery, going back to what you said earlier in the conversation, Heather, is sometimes you can come in here and one particular solution like eDiscovery can have 60, 70 different types of updates, in development, rolling out, launched. Good luck trying to filter through them to try and find what it is that's relevant to you. So I think these numbers here, and you probably see it from the drop that you get into your Teams channel, Mike, of, oh, okay, so I'm pretty much interested in that. I'm going to come into into the roadmap. And at the top here, I'm just going to type in the roadmap item, press search, and hey, presto, it only brings that one up. I think that's a good filtering from Microsoft to just narrow down what you want. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll also say that there are some teams that are not creating an item for each little update. So there will be something like we are making updates to the UI for review sets, but they won't list every single update, or they won't have an item for every single update. As they roll the updates out, the features or whatever changes in the UI, they'll update the actual like one item that they have. So I think that there is some effort around trying to condense down some of those updates, and some people like that, some people don't. I think it's one of those, like, no matter what decision is made on, do we want to break those out or not, like there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like that decision. So what do you think, Mike?
No, I was going to say that I think one of the frustrating things is when you get those sort of updates and you're like, all right, well, what does that actually mean? right? What am I actually looking for here? But at the same time, like I understand that if they listed out 20 different things and then rolled it out with 18, somebody's going to get mad about those other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
For
no-win
sure.
situation, really.
And I think that kind of, oh, sorry, how did I cut you off then?
No, go ahead.
And I think that kind of plays into the fact that, we do state some of these are in public preview, private preview. And like you're saying, Mike, some of those features, even the look and feel of something, you might get used to some it, that whatever it may be, as a public preview or private preview, but the end result, the actual achievement of rolling it out could be different. It could look different to what you're working on right now. And I think you're right. There's going to be some people out there that like some of the features that come in or are mentioned that don't make it, and not everything will, right, Heather, Mike?
Right. We've
We're
seen
seeing a lot.
Yeah, like we've seen things like the predictive coding that
Yeah.
they, it was in there. There were changes to it that were in preview for a while. It was something that was not heavily used. So since it was still in preview, it was something that did not move forward into the new UI. So, and I will just mention really quick that if you are a customer that has a unified contract and you have a CSAM, you can get technical update briefings on updates to whether it's eDiscovery by itself, Purview. You can work with your CSAM on specifics of those updates. You can work with a partner as well. There's lots of resources out there to get those specifics. Yeah.
Great input there. I think that's really relevant to somebody that does have that type of contract. So I think this is a great place to come. If you want to know what's happening, you want to understand things a little bit more, or somebody's mentioned to you there's probably potentially some new features coming out, or new, you've raised a change yourself, a design change request, as we call it, DCR, back from within Microsoft. You can follow that journey through and understand where it's coming and how it's coming and to what particular areas, specifically around these filters here. You can, you've got Microsoft Information Protection here that covers off anything in the Purview world. You've also got the ability to look at the status, as Mike mentioned before. So you've got in development, launch, rolling out, release phase as well. So we have many different terminologies, don't we, Heather and Mike? I'm sure you've read through them yourself, thinking, okay, so when am I going to get it? What does it mean? We have current channel, general availability, preview, targeted release, and targeted organization, targeted release for set people. So if you do see one of those and you're wondering what they are, you can come in here and kind of figure out what it means to you based on the actual update that you've got.
That's the one I miss all the time, because I'll see a feature and not realize that it's only for targeted release.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I don't have it.
Yeah. We like to get you excited. I think that's the thing, Mike. And then you can come in here and kind of understand general availability. Go on, Heather.
You can go through the descriptions. I was going to ask Mike about I was going to ask Mike when he does his testing, if he's working in preview, how he goes through that with understanding like what's in preview, how he works with preview as compared to GA. But we can go through and describe these first.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question to ask. All I was going to say, general availability, I'm sure it speaks for yourself. That's available to you, and there's going to be no changes to that for the foreseeable future. There might be some additives to it as we go along, but if you're looking for when it's actually going to be reasonable for you to start looking at this, general availability is what most people will gravitate towards. But yes, Mike, back to Heather's question there.
So the difficulty here, and the challenge really is at work, right? Because I work for a law firm, so we are hesitant to make changes, which is why we love Microsoft so much, right? as much as I would like to be in preview and make sure that we see things, or even put some of our users in preview so that we, like the IT department, can see things before the attorneys do and test them, that's a bit of a push, right? Because putting our desktop software, for example, in preview mode, kind of like, we might break some stuff, right? There's a lot of add-ins and various tools that we use specific to our practice that, I might break some stuff in preview, and that's not great. So when I'm testing, I use a separate tenant that I have that is in preview. That entire thing's in preview. It's not really production. I don't have users. It's just me. So I can I don't feel bad if I break that or break something in it, because no one else is impacted by that. So I will put that in preview so that I can see things a little bit earlier and test it. Any of the eDiscovery testing I do pretty much is done in that tenant, which sometimes gets a little confusing because I don't have a Copilot license in that tenant. So occasionally I'll have to test something in our tenant with my Copilot license and then go, okay, here's what I saw, but I can't show you any screenshots.
Yeah.
But so it does get the licensing gets a little confusing, because as much as I like having a place to test, I can't enable licenses in it beyond the core E5, because it's an old dev tenant. But it's also nice to have an old dev tenant that if stuff goes wrong or stuff is on hold, I can just experiment and I'm not impacting anybody else's day to day. So for that, or like I said, now if you don't have that's where things get more challenging, right? Because essentially your IT department is seeing the changes at the same time all of your users are.
Yeah.
And especially when you talk about things like Loop and Copilot. Copilot's the big one lately, because things just appear. Suddenly everybody has it, right? And no one knows what to do with it, so they start playing with it. And you have no idea what they're doing with it.
Yep.
So you really have to that's where you're really paying attention to Message Center and roadmap, so that it's coming and you're literally looking for it. And hopefully you notice it before anybody else does. So you can start kind of going, this is what it does. Now, luckily, again, because we're in legal and hesitant to change, people don't generally go experimenting all that often. Most of the time they're like, what's that? Ooh, scary new stuff. So that works in my favor often. I'm not complaining about it. But it gives me the opportunity to kind of say, okay, what does this do? And kind of pull that in, because I know that recently, for example, the facilitator agent in Teams meetings, right, just sort of appeared. Like, hey, you can add an agent to your Teams meeting, but what does it do? And that's sort of, and it does a lot, right? It's super. I've been playing with that this week, and I'm like, this is super interesting, but it does a lot, right? There's a lot going on in this meeting. I'm not sure everybody's going to love. So just being able to document all of that stuff before people start using it, I think is a real challenge, because like you said, unless you can get into a preview environment, you're kind of getting the changes at the same time. And that can be really tricky. And from an eDiscovery perspective, it also is like your workflow might need to change today. Right? Account for something that changed. And do you have that flexibility to change how you're collecting data because Microsoft moved it? Private channels is the perfect example of that, right? Where they moved the location, right? And again, I think it makes sense. I like it as a change, but it got complicated now because the old messages are over here, the new ones are over here, and I've got to account for that in my workflow that maybe I wasn't doing before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think a lot of organizations do have a dev tenant, and they do have kind of a flow for testing things that are in private preview. And we can talk a little bit, Ryan, you can describe the difference between private preview and public preview. But a lot of times that's not necessarily eDiscovery is not part of that testing. Normally it's around things like, a new Copilot, or, something new on the security side, things that are, kind of what is seen by IT as a bigger impact, where, it's not always thought about how is this going to affect eDiscovery. So, I think if you are in eDiscovery for, an organization, it might be worth trying to connect to, your IT group or whoever to see if there is a dev tenant, if it is something that you can get access to do some of that testing.
Yeah, great point. Great point.
And
Excuse me.
eDiscovery testing is vital. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I do it all the time, so I probably.
Yeah.
But I think it is, and the reason I say that is because a lot of times the documentation for a new feature will be like, this is how it works, this is how it's stored. Like, I really need to see that, right? I need to go in and actually run a search. So I am constantly in this workflow of like, I'm going to go use this tool. I'm going to create some content, whether it's Teams, Copilot, whatever. I'm going to put something super unique in it so that I can search for it across the entire tenant, which again, if you're in a large environment, searching across the entire tenant is impossible anyway. It's time suck. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
You, as you're testing, because I know you have your blog, you work for a law firm, which is a little different than like a corporation or something like that. But, do you document like thoroughly the testing that you do? Because I can imagine that, that could be something that comes up as far as like, where is the testing, and, how are we documenting this to prove that this is defensible?
Yeah, and that's, like I said, that's what because I have that smaller tenant that I don't mind searching across the whole tenant. It still only takes me 5 minutes, or it's not a really large environment. Is I can create something and just be like, all right, search across everything, right? Tell me where it is, right? I'm not narrowing down my search. I'm not doing anything to impact the results of what I get. I'm just search across the whole thing. Tell me where it is. And then I can collect it, pull in a reset, look at the paths, and be like, okay, this is where this is stored. Then I can, if I have access to it, I can verify it. That's where Loop gets interesting, because the paths don't take you anywhere. Those embedded containers are so fun. But yeah, so it's just kind of like, okay, that's where it is. I can show that, right? I've got verifiable proof that this item lives here. And then occasionally I have to go back and retest, right? Because private channels is a good example. Things have moved, right? So now I've got to retest and figure out where that is. And I'm kind of constantly doing that, because not to disparage anyone at Microsoft, but there have been times that things have moved without being documented so clearly. That the location changed a little bit. So it is something that I'm constantly kind of going back and looking at. This is different. This is in a new place, or this is a new feature. This is new content. The agents and Copilot are really, inside of meetings, are creating a lot of new content, some of which is not actually discoverable. Kind of lays in graph and not inside of anything that the eDiscovery tools can collect from. So kind of being able to identify that, I think, is really important to understand, because eventually what's going to happen is that somebody's going to be like, I was in this meeting and this happened, and I think there's some information relevant to my case. And it's like, okay, but where is it? Right? Where is it really? Which I think, that is something that has been, I know, Heather, you and I have probably talked about this at some point with some of the clients somewhere. The difficulty of asking a custodian, for example, where did you see this? Well, I saw it in the Teams channel, but it was actually a Loop component being pulled from somewhere else. Like, they're going to tell you it's in the Teams channel because that's where they saw it.
I feel like, Mike, for you and me, Teams will always be like the bane of our existence, because it's just, a UI for all of these other components, and we keep pulling more into Teams. And, you mentioned agents. I have been having so many conversations around organizations that are looking at, how to, build Copilot agents. And there are so many different options. Right now, there's just a lot of discussion around, controlling who has access, who can build agents, but, and definitely it's important from the security side, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking like, this is going to cause a larger conversation about eDiscovery as well. And, I feel like right now most organizations are just looking at like, what can we do with this? How can we use this? And they're still in the planning phase. But yeah, in the back of my head, like I just have like, alarms going off going, this is going to be like a big eDiscovery thing where you just have people creating agents and you can create agents from all these different places. And how is this going to come together for eDiscovery? So, Mike, that'll be a good project to dig into.
Yeah, I was going to say we are next week. I'm part of a panel webinar for ILTA. They're doing a session basically about, hey, your co-pilot interactions are discoverable, right? They're in the mailbox,
Yep.
right? If you tell your eDiscovery people to export the mailbox, they're getting all the co-pilot interactions with it.
Yep.
So it's just sort of that heads up that, hey, this is going to be in your mailbox now.
Yep.
And when you're doing eDiscovery, like everything you've done in Copilot is going to be in there.
Yeah. We should do a dedicated episode on that. I think that would be an interesting one. We also have the message center. Now, this is what I mentioned at the front of the call. Like, I'll be honest, I've very rarely been in here. I usually just go straight to the roadmap. But there's a reason why this is here, because it does give you a lot more information. If I just click on this one right here, you get this pop-out screen that gives you a lot of information on the summary of it, the introduction, when it will happen, how this affects your organization, and what you can do to prepare. This would actually come with, like it's saying here, some actual configurations. So if you need to do some changes on your side, or there's an inclusion of something, then you can work out what it is, how to control it, how to prevent it, how to turn it off, how to turn it on, so on and so forth. So Message Center, I like, but I always forget it's there for some reason. What about yourself, Heather, Mike?
I go to Message Center a lot because I do find that there's more detail here. I also find sometimes that if a release is going to be pushed back, that it will be announced in the Message Center with a little bit more detail than the roadmap. And sometimes there will be some things in the Message Center that I don't want to say they're a little bit more critical, but it's not necessarily, hey, here's a new feature. It could be, something that is, a change in like the back end or something like, changing, a limit or capacity or something like that. So, and I think it comes from, and I think it's Mike as well. Like we come from the partner side, like from the place where we did a lot of eDiscovery testing. Like we together, we're working, on basically just doing testing to figure out eDiscovery impact like full time for a while. So I think that that's just our mindset because we were like forced to do it. But yeah, I think, and I like the planner thing that you mentioned, Mike. I have tried it before and I'm not a big fan, like my brain just doesn't work in the planner way. So I get frustrated with it quickly. But if someone can go in, like you said, and take the items from planner and quickly assign them, basically triage them, I think that's a really good way to be able to get the message center info without actually having access to the message center.
Yeah, I like I said, I love the message center, and Ryan, to your point on the details, I think one of the best things about it is that when I'm looking at roadmap items, I know for me, I'm just trying to get through it quick because it's a lot, right? And I'm already doing enough during the day. So a lot of times I will just sort of skim it, and certain things just won't catch my eye. They're not relevant to our environment. And then I'll see it in the message center, and it's like the same item, but now that I'm looking at the details, this is highly relevant to us.
Yeah.
I just missed it the first time. And a good example of that is recently there was a change in the message center about Teams meeting URLs, and how they were basically recommending, like, look, if you're using a service that rewrites URLs on incoming emails, like we do at a law firm, right? Teams is going to start checking that URL when you go in the meeting, and if it's not the actual URL, you might get blocked. And I was like, hey, this is actually super relevant to us. We need to make sure we have an exception in there. So I was immediately going out to our IT, our infrastructure guys, like, hey, we need to make a change here. We need to put some exceptions in because Microsoft is going to start blocking people from hitting Teams meetings because we rewrite URLs for security, which again, a lot of people do. But and when I saw it, I think the first time I was like, security URLs, whatever. And then when I saw the details, I was like, oh no, that's exactly us, right? That's exactly what we do, and we need to stop. So we were able to get ahead of that because I saw it and saw all the details and realized that it hit, that was something that hits us.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
One quick thing that I do want to bring up with the Message Center is, unlike the roadmap, where the roadmap is public, it's out there for everyone, the Message Center, what you see here could depend on, your licensing, what you have available in the tenant. So, there might be something, and I've had this happen where someone's like, hey, can you look up this Message Center item? And I don't have it. And it's because I don't have something like Teams Premium. So it's not going to give me Message Center items for Teams Premium. So, this is a little bit more customized to what is available in your tenant as compared to the roadmap. So if there is something you don't see in the Message Center, it's most likely because it's something that isn't necessarily relevant to your tenant. And there are, like I said, I'll go and use Bing or whatever and try to look it up to see if somebody has a blog or something like that. And I'll just use the roadmap ID or Message Center ID.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. It would only be available to the features that you've got enabled, of course. I think in here as well, you get a little bit more information. As you can see, you get the opportunity to archive, you get the opportunity to share or copy the link. Why those two would be different, I don't know, because if you just copy the link, you can copy the link. If you share it, you share it. And then you can mark the item as unread as well. So I think this is another good thing. If there are multiple admins in here and you know that you've clicked on something that's not really relevant, maybe you can mark it as unread again for Mike to consume or Heather to consume as well. Whereas a roadmap, like you're saying, Heather, it's just a static bunch of information for you to go in and kind of reason over. Let's just click on another one and just see, again, the information that we get. Obviously, with this one, you get a little bit more information because it's more about APIs, but you get the considerations here as well and why these things are happening, why they're relevant to you, or why they could be relevant to you. Specifically, it's something as important as graph APIs. This does make sure it stands out from an eDiscovery standard perspective, but it also, on most of the occasions, it gives you that roadmap item back, so you can go back to the roadmap item and understand, okay, where is this from a delivery perspective, and how long do I have to prepare for this? Going back to your earlier comment, Mike, of it's just appeared. Now, what do I do to get ready for it?
Yeah, I love the fact that it's linked to roadmap ID, and I can see both. That is super helpful to get as much information as possible. And then, like you said, at a certain point, as it gets closer, you start looking for the MVPs and others who have it in preview, who are part of targeted release, who have done the YouTube video showing it. Like, all right, what is this going to look like? The people who have access to do that, share it on YouTube. I love them. They're awesome.
Yeah. We should encourage more of that, actually. And you know what, Heather, I think thinking about it, maybe we should do some more of those in preview features, more around I'd say the public preview stuff, because the private previews elements are invite only, and they will change significantly, I guess, over time from what a public preview is.
Yeah, I mean, that's something good to bring up as well is, when we're talking preview, we have private preview, which is typically invite only, where, Microsoft is sending it to a particular tenant. And you either go through channels at Microsoft to get that private preview, or, again, it's an invite thing. And typically for private previews, it's not even beta. It's in that place where they're looking for feedback. So it's not just testing, does this work or not? They're looking for feedback. And sometimes in private preview, we'll, take that feedback, go back and make some changes, redesign, whatever, change the release because we got feedback that we're implementing, and then kind of re-release it. So private preview is very, I don't want to say specialized, but again, it's invite only, like you said, where public preview is typically like, hey, this is something that we've been through that initial testing. We've been through like getting that initial feedback. We're putting it out there. Public preview is, there may be, you may run into an issue here and there. It's not ready for general availability, but it is something that is available to everyone. And then by the time it gets to GA, some of that has been worked out. So if you do have something private preview, I always tell people, like, just realize that it could change a lot between there and GA. But I definitely agree with maybe digging into some of those public preview items and how they relate to eDiscovery.
Yeah, we should definitely do that and get Mike on, do some testing with Mike in the background as well. For sure.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, even though I don't have access to some of that stuff, like I tried to get involved in some of the customer connection, some of the NDA groups. And it's not so much because, again, it's covered under NDA. I can't put it in the newsletter, but I can start thinking about how I'm going to test it because I've seen somebody using it, right? I have an understanding of how it's going to work when it hits. So when it comes, I'm not going, okay, this is completely new to me. I don't even begin to know how to test this, but I have an idea already of how I'm going to test it. So it does save a lot of time to kind of get that information.
And I think that is the key of the message of the podcast today, right? And I think that's a great comment to end on, is the fact that the roadmap is there for you to take advantage of. The message center is there for you to take advantage of. There are ways, solutions to get this delivered directly into your Teams chat or your mailbox or into Planner if you like, in the background. Just make sure you're aware of what's coming. Some of these changes can catch you out if you're not ready for them. Back to Mike's example before of, oh, it's here, and now I have to change my target operating model or my workflow or permissions or whatever the case may be. But we just wanted to let you know about that. Heather and I, we've got loads planned, haven't we, Heather? Loads planned. Mike's going to come back on as well. We're going to do some more dedicated discovery application level layers and so on and so forth. But as always, really appreciate you joining us. Mike, thanks for coming on. It's been a great one. Really appreciate your time as well.
Always fun to geek out and talk about eDiscovery.
Indeed.
I always love working with you, Mike. So it was well worth getting up at 7 a.m. So thank you so much for your time.
Indeed.
No problem.
Indeed. Thanks a lot, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Cool. Thank you.